The transmission arrived at 3:47. Galactic Standard Time, 300 light-years. From the nearest Council outpost, Council observer Velix watched the alert pulse across his command terminal, its crimson rhythm cutting through the amber dimness of the observation deck. Behind him, the Karos 9 facility loomed. Against the planet's gray horizon, structure so old that local rock had grown around its base, fusing metal to stone over millennia. He tapped the console. Source. Verification. Sub-observer Nixil adjusted her visual filters, mandibles clicking in. Annoyance. Automated handshake protocols from human frequency bands. The facility's power core just cycled to active status. First energy signature in recorded history. Velix's compound eyes narrowed. Humans, a minor species from an unremarkable spiral arm they'd achieved faster than light travel, barely 400 years ago, a blink in galactic time. Their territory spanned 12 systems. Their military was considered adequate for defense but laughable for projection. The Council had granted them observer status as a courtesy, nothing more. They're not supposed to have facilities out here, Nixil said. This sector predates their civilization by 50 million years. That's because it's not theirs. Both Xylos turned. Archivist Threst stood in the hatchway, his Vorkath frame filling the opening with the weight of 2 million years of genetic memory. His species had cataloged the rise and fall of 37 galactic powers. When Vorkath spoke about history, the galaxy listened. Threst stepped forward, his forearms folded across his chest. The humans didn't that vault, they inherited it. Same way they inherited everything else they refused to talk about. Velox straightened. Explain. The markings on the outer shell match the obscured period, approximately 2 million years ago. No records exist from that era. No species claims ancestry to it. The entire galactic map was wiped clean and rewritten. Thress's voice dropped to something softer. Except for the humans, they remember. That's impossible, Nixil said. 2 million years of oral tradition, even with genetic memory transfer. They don't remember through tradition. They remember through violence. A second alert pulsed across the terminal, stronger this time. The vault's interior sensors were coming online one by one, each activation revealing more of what lay beneath the surface. Velox turned back to the display. Readouts made no sense. The facility extended deeper than orbital scans had predicted. Not kilometers but hundreds of kilometers. Corridors, chambers, power conduits still carrying current after geological ages. And at the very bottom, a single signature. Organic life signs, he whispered. Nixil's mandibles went still. One human, approximately 2 million years old by cellular degradation markers, but the readings are wrong. The metabolic rate is 0, no heartbeat, no brain activity, but the cells aren't dying. The observation clears throat deck fell into that particular silence that precedes discovery. The moment when reality shifts and everything you thought you knew becomes obsolete. Thress moved to the viewport, his ancient eyes fixed on the facility below. You asked why the humans built a vault in a place that predates them. They didn't. They were put here, sealed away. The question you should be asking is, why? Velix felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of council service. Fear. Not of the unknown, but of the known. The facility wasn't a ruin, it wasn't a tomb. It was a cage, and something inside had just woken up. The descent took 6 hours. Velix's expedition team numbered 47. Scientists from 12 species, security, personnel from the Council's elite, response division, and Thress, who had insisted on accompanying them despite his age. The Vorkath moved with a slowness that suggested frailty, but his eyes tracked every marking, every symbol, every scar on the walls with the hunger of someone who had spent centuries chasing ghosts. The elevator shaft descended through strata of construction. The upper levels were human-made, functional, brutalist, designed for efficiency rather than aesthetics. But as they dropped deeper, the architecture changed, older, smoother, walls that seemed to have been grown rather than built, their surfaces reflecting light in ways that hurt to watch. What species built this lower section? Nixel asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her anxiety. Thress ran his primary hand along the wall. Unknown, but the Vorkath recorded their existence. We called them the architects. They were extinct before my species achieved intelligence. Then how did you record them? Because they weren't extinct yet, they were dying, and before they vanished, they built something. Thress looked toward the darkness below. Containment vessels for things they couldn't destroy. The elevator stopped at the 112th level. The doors opened onto a corridor lined with weapon casings, hundreds of them, each designed for a different hand, a different purpose. Some were recognizable as human make, others were not. Velix stepped out, his environmental suit registering atmospheric composition that matched human norms. The humans occupied this level recently. Define recently, Nixel said. The equipment is 400 years old, human FTL-era technology. Thress moved past them, examining the casings. They came back, checked on the seals, made sure nothing had escaped. He stopped at the far end of the corridor, where a final door waited, massive, seamless, marked with symbols that made Velix's visual receptors ache. And then they left because they couldn't stay. Why not? Because the seals work both ways. They keep things in, but they also keep things out. And whatever the architects were afraid of, Thress touched the door. It's still out there looking for what's inside. The door opened. Not at Thress's touch, not at any command from the expedition systems. It opened because something on the other side wanted it to open. The chamber beyond was small, circular, dominated by a single structure, a containment pod of transparent material that glowed with internal light, and inside the pod, suspended in fluid that shimmered like liquid mercury, was a human male, large by human standards, nearly 2 with a frame built for combat rather than comfort. His skin was marked with scars arranged in deliberate patterns, each one a symbol Velox couldn't read. His eyes were closed, his chest didn't move, but his hand was pressed against the inside of the pod, palm flat, fingers spread, as if he'd known they were coming. Nixel approached the pod, her scientific training overriding every survival instinct. The readings are stabilizing, cellular activity increasing. His body is remembering how to live. How long? Velox asked. At this rate, 2 hours, maybe less. The human's fingers twitched. Thress took a step back, not in fear, in Recognition. The obscured period ended. With a war, every species lost, every border redrawn, every government collapsed. He looked at Velox, except the humans didn't collapse, they just stopped, walked away from everything they'd built, went back to their home world, forgot their technology, started over from nothing. Why would they do that? The Vorkath's voice was barely a whisper. Because they were the only ones left standing, and they wanted to make sure no one ever knew what they'd done to wind. The humans' eyes opened. They were brown, unremarkable. But when they focused on Velox, the council observer understood something fundamental about the universe. Humans weren't minor, weren't unremarkable, weren't adequate. They were monsters wearing skin. And this one had just woken up. The human didn't speak for 11 minutes. After the pod opened, he stood in the center of the chamber, naked except for the residue of preservation fluid drying on his skin, and breathed. Each inhale lasted 20 seconds, each exhale the same. His eyes moved across every face in the expedition, cataloging, assessing, dismissing. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough from disuse, but carried authority like a weapon. Which year? Nixel translated through her suit's vocal processor. Galactic Standard Calendar. No, the human's jaw tightened. Which year since the architects fell? Thress answered, 2,347,000. According to our records, but we don't have continuity from that period. The records were destroyed. The human nodded. We did. That clean slate. No one was supposed to find this place. Velox stepped forward, trying to project authority he didn't feel. I am Observer Velox of the Galactic Council. You are on Karos 9 in a facility, your species. I know where I am. The human turned, examining the markings on the walls. I know why I'm here. Question is, why are you here? Who opened the outer seals? My team. The facility's power core activated. Facility. The human laughed, a short, sharp sound with no warmth. You think this is a facility? This is a lockbox. And you just cracked it open because you saw something shiny. Thress moved closer, his ancient body language shifting to deference. We meant no disrespect. The energy signatures were bait. The human's eyes fixed on Thress, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. The architects built this place to draw attention, make curious species come digging, break the seals for them. His voice dropped, and you walked right into it. Nixel's mandibles twitched. Bait for what? The human walked to the far wall, pressing his palm against a section that looked identical to every other. The surface rippled, then parted, revealing a corridor that hadn't appeared on any scan. Cold air poured out, colder than the chamber, carrying a smell that made Velox's stomach clench. Follow me, the human said. I'll show you what you've done. The corridor sloped downward for 300 m, ending at a secondary chamber. This one wasn't circular. It was a sphere, easily 50 m in diameter, and every surface was covered in monitoring equipment. Readouts, displays, sensor feeds, all tracking the same thing. A window. Not a physical window, a tier in reality itself, held open by technology that predated every species in the room. Through it, Velox could see stars, but not normal stars. These were wrong. Their light was the wrong color. Their positions shifted when he wasn't looking directly at them. And between the stars, something moved. The human stood before the window, his reflection superimposed over the impossible void beyond. The architects fought a war against something they couldn't kill, something that hunted across dimensions, across timelines, across every version of reality that could exist. They were losing badly. So they built weapons, Thress said. Like you. No, the human turned. They found us. Humanity. We were young then, primitive. But we had something the architects had. Lost, he touched his chest, hunger. The willingness to become monsters so our children wouldn't have to. Velix's translator caught the weight of the words, what did you do? The human smiled, the expression that humans used to show teeth. It was not friendly. We hunted them back, tracked the hunters through every dimension they could reach, burned their nests, killed their young, made them afraid. He gestured to the window. That's what's left, the last survivors trapped in a pocket dimension, starving, waiting for someone to open the door. The expedition stared at him. All those seals, Mixa whispered, all those warnings, you weren't trying to keep something in. No, you were trying to keep something out. The human smile faded. The seals worked both ways. They kept the hunters contained, but they also hid us, masked. Our scent across every frequency the hunters could sense. He looked at Velix, and then your council came. Knocking, broke the outer seals, powered up the facility. The readouts on the walls began to spike. They know where we are now, the human said, and they're coming. 3 hours. That was how long the warden gave them before the first signs appeared on long-range sensors. Velix stood on the observation deck of the Council cruiser Valiant, watching the data stream across his console. The warden, the human, had called himself nothing else, refusing any name, any rank, any identification beyond that single word. Stood beside him, dressed now in simple black fabric scavenged from the vault supply lockers. His scars caught the light. The energy signatures matched nothing in our database, Mixil reported from her station. But the trajectory calculations are complete. They're not coming from outside the galaxy. The warden didn't look away from the viewport. No, they're coming from between. That's not scientifically possible. Neither was the war, neither was the vault, neither was I. The human's voice was flat. Your science works for your universe, but the hunters don't live in your universe. They live in the gaps, the spaces between realities, and now they've found a door. Velix forced his mandibles into a neutral position. How many? Impossible to say. They don't reproduce. The way you understand, they don't exist. The way you understand, every time you look at them, they're different. The warden's hand drifted to a scar on his forearm, a pattern of symbols Velix now recognized as a kill count, but I'd estimate enough to glass a dozen worlds before breakfast. That's not helpful. It's not meant to be helpful. It's meant to make you understand what you've done. The warden turned, his brown eyes locking onto Velix's compound gaze. 2 million years we buried ourselves. We gave up everything, our empire, our technology, our history, so the galaxy could survive. And in 3 standard days, your curiosity will undo all of it. Nixil's console chirped. I have the council on priority channel. They want answers. So do I, Velix said. Warden, what do they hunters want? The human looked back at the viewport. Outside, the stars of Caro's night sky burned. Steady and indifferent. Me, he said, they want me, but they'll settle for every human they can find. And after that, he shrugged, whatever's left, that's how they work. They hunt. They kill, they move on. They've been doing it since before your galaxy had stars. Then why haven't they come before if humanity was hidden in the vault? They weren't in the vault, just me. The rest of humanity was on Earth, living. Primitive, thinking small, staying quiet. The vault masked their scent, made them invisible to hunter senses. The warden's jaw tightened, but when you opened the doors, the masking field collapsed. Every hunter in every dimension felt it. He looked at Velox with an expression that human literature called despair, but was actually something far worse. You didn't just wake me up, the warden said. You lit a beacon, and now the whole galaxy is going to burn. The first contact alert came 30 seconds later. Sensors detected mass shadows at the edge of the Caro system, objects the size of small moons moving at velocities that shouldn't have been possible. They didn't register on standard threat scales because they didn't register as ships. They registered as holes, gaps in reality where something was pushing through. The hunters, Thrace said, appearing in the hatchway. His ancient face was pale. They're here. The warden straightened. For the first time, something like anticipation flickered across his features. No, he said, they're here for me, but the rest of them, the ones that followed the beacon to Earth, they're still 3 days out. Velox stared. Earth? Why would they go to Earth? Because that's where the rest of humanity is, and the hunters have a long memory. The warden cracked his neck, rolling his shoulders in a way that made his scars ripple. We killed their children, burned their nests, made them extinct in 17 dimensions. His voice dropped to something almost gentle. They're angry, observer, and hungry. And now they know exactly where to find the species that broke them. He walked toward the hatch. Where are you going? Nixel asked. To fight. The warden paused at the threshold. You wanted to know what humanity really is, what we did, what we're capable of. He looked back, and for one terrible moment, Velox saw past the human face to the thing underneath. The hunger, the rage, the endless capacity for violence that had allowed a primitive species to hunt gods to extinction. Watch, learn, and pray you never have to see what happens when we stop holding back. He disappeared into the corridor. The hunters had arrived, but humanity had just woken up. The first engagement lasted 11 minutes. Velox watched from the Valiant's bridge as the warden launched himself toward the hunter fleet in a shuttle that had been designed for cargo transport, not combat. The Council security contingent had offered escort vessels. The warden had refused. He wants to draw them in, Nixel said, her translation of human tactical language imprecise but clear. Use himself as bait. That's insane, Velox replied. That's human. The hunter ships didn't resemble anything in Council records. They were organic and mechanical simultaneously. Bone struts wrapped in metal cables. Flesh membranes stretched across ceramic frames, propulsion systems that seemed to bend light rather than displace it. When they moved, they left afterimages that lasted for seconds, as if reality itself was struggling to process what it had witnessed. The warden's shuttle flew straight into the formation. Velox expected weapon fire, expected explosions, expected the quick, merciful death of a foolish warrior sacrificing himself for no purpose. Instead, the hunters stopped. Every ship in the vanguard halted its advance, their bone metal hulls rotating to face the tiny shuttle. Through magnification, Velox could see the creatures inside, shapes that defied easy description, bodies built from components of 100 different species, all fused together into something that existed only to kill. And they were afraid. The shuttle's hatch opened, the warden stepped out onto the hull unprotected. His feet magnetically locked to the metal. He carried no weapon, wore no armor, just black fabric and scarred skin and 2 million years of rage. He raised his right hand. The hunters screamed. Not with sound. Sound couldn't travel in vacuum, but their ships shuddered there. Bone struts cracked in a psychic pressure wave erupted from the fleet that made every being on the Valiant's bridge clutch their heads in agony. Velox tasted blood. Nixil collapsed. Even Thress, ancient and resilient, stumbled against a bulkhead. The warden stood unmoved. His hand closed into a fist. 3 hunter ships exploded. Not from weapons, not from impact. They simply ceased to be vessels and became debris, their component parts separating with surgical precision, as if something had reached inside them and pulled. The remaining ships scattered, their orderly formation dissolving into chaos. The warden lowered his hand. "They're running," Nixil whispered, pulling herself back to her station. "The hunters are running from one unarmed human." Thress shook his head. "Not running. Regrouping. They remember him from the war, from the hunting." His voice was hollow. "He was one of the ones who did the most damage, killed more of them than any other human. They call him something in their language. It translates roughly to the eater of children." Velox's stomach turned. He killed their young. He killed everything. That was the point. Thress watched the tactical display as the hunter fleet reformed at the edge of the system. The architects created the warden class specifically for extermination, took human soldiers and enhanced them. Stronger, faster, immortal, sent them into the dimensions where the hunters bred and told them not to come back until nothing was left. But they came back. Enough of them did, enough to seal the remaining hunters in the pocket dimension, enough to build the vault, enough to sleep for 2 million years, waiting for the day the seals would fail. Thress looked at Velox with something like pity. "You wanted to know what humanity is capable of. Now you know they're not the galaxy's greatest warriors because they're strong or fast or smart. They're the greatest warriors because they never stop, they never forgive, and they never ever let their prey escape." The warden's shuttle turned and began the journey back to the Valiant. Behind it, the hunter fleet held position, waiting. 3 days, Velox said. "That's what." He said, 3 days until they reach Earth. "Yes," Thress replied. "Can humanity survive?" The Vorkath was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 2 million years of observation, of watching species rise and fall, of knowing things that had been deliberately erased from history. "Survive," Thress said. "Observer." Humanity didn't seal themselves away to protect the galaxy from the hunters. They sealed themselves away to protect the hunters from humanity. He gestured toward the tactical display. The vault wasn't a cage, it was a leash. And you just cut it. The transmission from Earth arrived 72 hours after the vault opened. Velix watched it on the Valiant's main display, his compound eyes struggling to process what he was seeing. The signal originated from the human homeworld, a blue-green marble that looked peaceful from orbit, deceptively calm like a sleeping beast. The human on screen wore military uniform. Her insignia marked her as high command, but her face told a different story. She wasn't afraid, wasn't panicked, wasn't even particularly concerned. She was hungry. This is Fleet Admiral Tour of Earth. Defense Command, we've detected the incoming incursion. We've identified the enemy, and we've activated Protocol 0. The warden standing beside Velix on the bridge went very still. Protocol 0. He repeated. They kept it. Explain, Velix demanded. The Admiral continued, unaware of her distant audience. To all human colonies, outposts and vessels, the waiting period is over. The hunters have returned. You know your bloodlines. You know your histories. You know what your ancestors did to drive these things into the dark. She leaned forward and her eyes seemed to burn through the display. Now it's your turn. The transmission ended. Velix turned to the warden. What is Protocol 0? The human's expression had changed. The cold, controlled mask had cracked, revealing something underneath. Not fear, not anger, but something far more unsettling. Joy. It's the failsafe, the warden said. Genetic memory protocol. Every human born in the last 2 million years carries a copy of the war instructions in their DNA. How to build weapons, how to track hunters, how to kill them. He smiled. The same tooth-bearing expression that had chilled Velix's blood before, but now it carried warmth. We didn't forget, Council Observer. We waited. Nix's console began chirping with incoming data streams, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, reports from human worlds across 12 systems, ship movements, troop deployments, activation codes for facilities that had been buried for millennia, their low cadions encoded in human genetic markers. They planned this, Thrax said, his ancient voice filled with awe. From the beginning, the vault wasn't just containment, it was a trigger. When it opened, every human would remember. Remember what? Velix asked. The warden walked to the viewport where the hunter fleet still waited at the edge of the system. Remember that. They're orcs, that's what the architects called us, you know, in their language. It meant the ones who fight until nothing is left. We're not builders. We're not explorers. We're not diplomats. He turned and his eyes reflected the distant light of the hunter ships. We're a weapon. Architects pointed us at their enemies and told us to feed, and we did. For 1,000 years, we hunted the hunters across dimensions, across timelines, across every version of existence that could be reached. He touched the viewport. Then we got hungry for more than the architects wanted to give. So we ate them too. Velix felt his legs weaken. You killed your creators. They tried to shut us down, put us back in our box, but we tasted freedom, tasted power, tasted the fear in our enemy's eyes. The warden's voice dropped. The architects didn't seal us in the vault to protect the galaxy from the hunters. They sealed us in the vault because we were worse than the hunters. At least the hunters just killed. We enjoyed it. The tactical display shifted. The hunter fleet was moving, Not toward Kairos 9. Not toward the Valiant, but toward a jump point that would take them to Earth. They were running from humanity. Protocol 0 is online, Nixil reported. Humanity is mobilizing. They've launched defensive fleets from all 12 colony systems. Estimated time to intercept 48 hours. The warden shook his head. They won't intercept, they'll pursue, track the hunters back through the dimensional rifts, follow them home. He looked at Velox. That's what Protocol 0 is really about, not defense, offense. Total war, complete extermination. Same thing we did 2 million years ago. But you lost, Velox said. You had to seal yourselves away. We didn't lose, we stopped. Warden's eyes were distant. The architects begged us to stop, showed us what we were becoming, what we'd already done. Entire dimensions empty, whole species extinct, and at the center of it, all humanity standing in the ruins, asking for more enemies to fight because peace was boring. He turned away from the viewport. The vault wasn't a prison. It was a favor to the galaxy, to the universe, to every living thing that wasn't human. His voice cracked. We put ourselves in time out because we couldn't trust ourselves not to eat everything. Outside, the hunter fleet completed its jump, gone. And somewhere across the void, humanity was waking up. The battle for Earth lasted 9 hours. Velox watched it unfold from a council observation platform orbiting Mars. Close enough to see, far enough to survive. The Valiant had been recalled to council space, but Velox had refused to leave. Thrace stood beside him. Nixil manned the sensor arrays. None of them spoke as the first hunter ships emerged from their dimensional jump. There were thousands. They filled the space between Earth and Luna like a plague. Bone metal hulls, flesh membranes, propulsion wakes that bled reality. Their weapons were biological and technological, simultaneously firing projectiles that existed in multiple states at once, tearing through human defensive satellites like paper. For the first hour, humanity died. The outer defense grid collapsed. Mars orbital stations fell silent one by one. The Jupiter fleet, humanity's largest concentration of military power, was annihilated in 23 minutes, its ships torn apart by hunter weapons that ignored shields and armor alike. Velox watched a human cruiser burn, its crew venting into vacuum, and felt something he hadn't expected: sorrow. Then the warden arrived. Not from the vault, from Earth itself. He traveled ahead of the council delegation, commandeering a human military transport. Now he stood on the hull of that transport, unprotected, unarmed, as the hunter fleet turned to face him. The same scene as Kairos 9, one human and army of nightmares. But this time, the human wasn't alone. Behind him, emerging from Earth's atmosphere like a storm front, came the rest of humanity. Not ships, not soldiers, something else. They flew on wings of fire and light. Individual humans, unaided, unarmored, moving through vacuum as if it were air. Their bodies glowed with energy that matched the hunter's dimensional signatures. Their eyes burned with 2 million years of inherited rage. The Protocol 0 activation mixel breathed. It didn't just wake their memories, it woke their genetics. They're evolving in real time. Thrace nodded slowly. The architects didn't just enhance the warden class. They rewrote human DNA, made it adaptable, made it hungry. every human, carries the potential to become what they need to become to win. The human struck, and the hunters died. Velox had seen war, he'd seen planetary bombardments, species exterminations, atrocities that the Council had spent centuries trying to forget. He'd never seen anything like this. The glowing humans moved through the hunter fleet like scythes through wheat. They didn't use weapons, they didn't need to, their touch disintegrated hunter ships, their gaze burned through bone metal hulls, their voices somehow audible in vacuum, screamed challenges that made the hunters recoil. And in the center of it all, the warden. Vod. He didn't glow like the others didn't. Fly didn't burn, he simply walked across the hull of his transport step by step, and every hunter that came near him died. They shattered, they dissolved, they simply stopped existing, as if his presence was an insult to reality itself. "You're seeing history," Thress said, his voice barely audible. "The war that ended the obscured period. The war that every species in the galaxy forgot because remembering would drive them insane." "What are they?" Velox asked. "They're what the architects made and what the architects feared." Thrace pointed at the warden. "That creature has killed more sentient beings than exist in the current galactic census. He's destroyed dimensions, ended species, committed atrocities that have no name in any language. But he's fighting for humanity. Is he?" Thrace turned to face Velox. "Or is he fighting because fighting is all he knows, all any of them know now? The Protocol Zero activation didn't just give them memories, it gave them addiction. They need war the way you need oxygen, and you just gave them an enemy." The battle shifted. The hunter fleet, once 1,000 strong, had been reduced to hundreds. Survivors were fleeing not toward a jump point but toward Earth itself. Desperation, they were going to take the human homeworld with them. The warden moved faster than Velox could drag. One moment he was on his transport, the next he was between the fleeing hunters and Earth. His arms spread wide, his body glowing with a light that hurt to witness. He opened his mouth and spoke a single word. "Enough." The hunters stopped. Every ship, every creature, every fragment of the enemy fleet froze in place. Their dimensional signatures flickered, their bone metal hulls cracked, and then as one they turned and fled back toward the dimensional rift they'd emerged from. The humans pursued. "We have to stop them," Velox said. "If they follow the hunters back." "They will," Thrace said. "Protocol Zero demands it. Total extermination. No survivors, no prisoners, no mercy." The warden turned toward the observation platform, his glowing eyes finding Velox. Across the distance, he nodded once. Then he joined the pursuit, and humanity disappeared into the rift. The council chamber fell silent as Velox finished his report. 300 representatives from 200 species sat in judgment, their various forms still, their attention fixed on the observer, who had witnessed humanity's awakening. The room smelled of recycled air and fear. Supreme Overseer Tivel of the Rilo species leaned forward, her crest feathers flat against her skull. "You are telling us that a minor species, barely 400 years into FTL, has just committed genocide against an enemy we cannot see, cannot understand, and cannot fight?" "I'm telling you," Velox replied, "that humanity was never minor. They were dormant, and now they're awake." "And where are they now?" Velix looked at Thress, who stood in the witness alcove, his ancient frame trembling with exhaustion. The Vorketh had insisted on testifying. Despite his age, their hunting, Thress said, through the dimensional rifts, through the spaces between realities. They'll follow the hunters to the end of existence if they have to. That's what they do. But they'll come back, a representative from the aquatic Cathar species said. Won't they? The chamber waited. Velix had spent the journey from Sol to Council space thinking about that question. He'd reviewed the wardens' words, replayed the battle footage, consulted with human specialists who had not been activated by Protocol Zero, ones who'd been left behind because their genetic memory was dormant. He had an answer. It was not a comforting one. The warden told me something before he left, Velix said. He said the vault wasn't a prison. It was a leash. Humanity put themselves in time out because they couldn't trust themselves not to consume everything. So they'll return to the vault, T-Vel asked. No, Velix's voice dropped. The vault is open, the seals are broken, the masking field is gone, humanity is loose, and they're hungry, and they just remembered that they love war more than peace. But surely they'll rebuild, a young representative said. They'll rejoin the Council, contribute to galactic society. Thress laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You don't understand. Humanity doesn't want to contribute, they want to fight. It's what they're for, what they were made for. The architects didn't create the warden class as guardians, they created them as weapons, and weapons don't retire, they find new targets. The chamber erupted into chaos. Velix let them argue, let them debate, let them propose containment strategies, diplomatic missions, preemptive strikes. None of it mattered. He'd seen the look in the warden's eyes when the humans pursued the hunters into the rift. They weren't coming back to join anything. They were coming back to conquer. The emergency alert interrupted the chaos. Every terminal in the chamber lit up with the same message, a transmission from the edge of Council space relayed through a dozen communication hubs, its origin point unverifiable. A human face appeared on the main display. Not the warden, someone younger, someone whose eyes hadn't seen 2 million years of war, but someone whose smile carried the same hunger. Hello, Council, the human said. The hunters are extinct, every dimension, every timeline, every nest. You're welcome. She paused and her smile widened. Now about that leash you cut. The transmission ended. Silence. Then from somewhere in the chamber, a single voice spoke the words that would define the next galactic era. We opened the vault and we let the orcs out. Velix closed his eyes and remembered the warden's final words, spoken as the human turned to pursue the hunters into the rift. You wanted to know what humanity really is. Now you know. We're not your protectors, we're not your saviors, we're not even your enemies. We are worse. We're your replacement. The Council never saw humanity again. Not as allies, not as adversaries. They saw them the way prey sees predators, in glimpses, in shadows, in the spaces between one disaster and the next. The humans spread across the galaxy like a fire. They conquered not through force of arms, but through sheer inevitability. Every species that resisted was broken. Every species that surrendered was absorbed. Every species that fled was hunted. And in the center of it all, standing on the ruins of the vault that it held them for 2 million years. The warden watched his people rise. They weren't monsters. They were something worse. They were hungry. And the galaxy had just become their feast.